I have some observations. Is there a place to fit that in?
Oh, yeah, so that's where we're gonna, that's what.
All right, so welcome everyone to the December 2022 5 Miles from Anywhere meeting. Today we have our special guest, Bonnie MacBird, who's going to give a little question and answer on her new book, What Child Is This? And then do a little bit of a reading for us. I'm just going to share my screen because we always start. I'll do a couple of quick announcements here, and then we will get started. Hold on one second because my slideshow isn't showing up. All right. Go, there it is. Oh. No. Here we are. Oops. Sorry. Okay. So welcome everyone, as I just said, to the December 5 Miles from Anywhere meeting. Okay. Happy holidays and to everybody. And there's lots of holidays for December. I put a bunch on there just because I love that December is this like wonderful holiday season where there's lots of different holidays. And it's just cool that so many cultures have, I think, holiday traditions in December. Couple of announcements. So we have the big Sherlock Holmes events coming up. The Sherlock Holmes Society of London annual dinner is coming up in January, and that will be on January 14th. And then BSI weekend is in person again this year, which is awesome. January 4th through 8th in New York City. And if you are there, please stop by the Merchants Room on Saturday, January 7th. Brian and I will be there for Belanger Books. We'll have a table. We'd love to see you. We'll have lots of book signings in there. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Unfortunately, if you can tell from that date, that means that we will not be having a January 5 Miles from Anywhere meeting, because that would be our scheduled day. So we will be back in February, though. And I'll tell you a little about the event for February then, because our guests for that are actually on this Zoom call. So maybe I'll have them say a little bit at the end about what we're going to talk about in February. Of course, there's lots of BSI weekend events, January 4th through 7th. We kind of talked about this last month, and I'm guessing most of you probably already know them. If you do get to Otto Penzler's Mysterious Bookshop on January 5th, we'll also be giving out the Doylean Awards. That's right here, the Thursday. And then the next day on Friday, he has an open house. Both cases, there's gonna be tons of Sherlock Holmes books and materials. And it's just a lot of fun, okay? And for people who cannot make it to New York, Brad Kiefhofer has an alternative festival to the BSI dinner online, and it's a lot of fun. You can, even if you go to the dinner, Zoom in afterwards. He keeps it going, I think, till pretty much till midnight. So definitely, if you get a chance, join that. Even if you're in New York for a little bit, you can just pop on and say hello. And then also wanted to announce that for the first time in the 21st century, the PSI, the Solar Ponds Society, the Broad Street Irregulars, is going to have a get-together. So we're going to do it a little earlier on January 6th than the BSI dinner. But this is the society started by Luther Norris. It's dedicated to keeping the memory of solar ponds alive. And this is going to be the first gathering in the 21st century. So it's very excited to announce that. A number of PSI members are going to be in New York, and we are going to gather. And more details will be about that will be out there soon. I'll send it out in our update here. But that is going to be a real exciting get together, because it's the first time in, I'm not even sure, probably 40 years that the PSI has gotten together.
Yeah.
Lastly, the Joel R. Center Prize, for those of you who might know some students, is live now. It's for all student writers. There are cash prizes up to $500 for 10th through 12th grade winners, and even $300 for even a 4th grader. So lots of money to be had. You just have to write an essay about Sherlock Holmes. There's lots of guidelines, or the guidelines are online. It's really an awesome opportunity to get kids excited about Sherlock Holmes, because they'll read the stories, they'll write about it, and then hopefully they'll submit an essay for an award. The awards are due, or the submissions, sorry, are due March 1st, 2023. And you can see that you can send the emails to Dan Andriaco at this email address, and the committee will read them and comment. It's awesome. So perfect. All right. Any other announcements before we move on?
Yes.
Shayna?
Hi, so one of the events happening during the BSI weekend is the William Gillette Memorial Luncheon. I wound up running that. I just wanted to let anyone in the chat who is planning or thinking of attending who has not yet sent in their check. Currently, we've got about 90 people. Planning to swing by the post office after this meeting to see if anyone's mailed in any more reservations. So you may want to, get on that if you are thinking of attending, because, room is limited, so better sooner than later.
Thank you, Shayna. Madeline, and then Steve.
Just really quick, and I'll pop this link into the chat. I think many of us probably know about the Don't Go Into the Cellar Theater Company. They're doing a Zoom play. Jonathan Goodwin's doing a one-man Zoom play next Saturday, 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern time. That is based on Claire Danes' short story, A Criminal Carol. So yes, it's a Christmas carol, but with Professor Moriarty. And it's not as schmaltzy as you would think. It doesn't, it's a different take on A Christmas Carol. And I think it's going to be really fun. So you do have to pay for tickets. It's like, it looks like it would just be like $6 or something, American dollars. So yeah, there's the link in the chat, and I think it's going to be a fun time.
Thank you, Madeline. And if you get a chance after, if you could email me, because when I'll send an update to the group and I'll put it in there.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Steve.
A few things tied to the Beacon Society. So for those that are interested, the Beacon Society will have their annual general meeting on December 29th. It will be virtual by Zoom, and we will send out information next week about it with the URL for the Zoom call and everything. But if you do attend those, please mark that on your calendar for December 29th. It'll be 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. The other thing that we're proud of, on the Beacon Society website, we just put a new webpage called the Comprehensive Look at the Stories, which is as much information as we could gather legally and with permission of all 60 stories. And there's tons of information, and we think it's a good way for people that are just learning about Sherlock Holmes, or even some seasoned Sherlockians, to find a lot of information about each one of the 60 stories. So feel free to go to the Beacon Society website and look at that. And then I am going to put my own little plug in. The crew of the Bark Star, we have our meeting tomorrow if anybody would like to attend. Joe Eckridge is our guest speaker. But we also just put all 6 of our books up for sale for the first time on Barnes & Noble. And they are very reasonably priced. They're about $6.50 to $7 for the paperbacks. But so we're really excited about that. So.
Oh, great. Thank you for those announcements. Did I miss anyone? I don't see any.
Yes.
Oh, who else? Tom.
Yes.
I want to announce that the latest Natalie McMaster's novel is going to release on Amazon on Monday. It's called Sister. That was a year in the writing. So while Natalie is the detective for the new millennium, about as unlike Sherlock Holmes as you could get. But if you're interested, take a look. And I will also put the link in the chat, probably toward the end of the meeting, because right now I've got everything closed down, but this meeting, so I can participate in it. But I will get the link up before we quit. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Which brings me to our guest of honor for today. So let me just read a little intro about Bonnie, who is a wonderful writer, by the way. And hopefully everyone has already read this book and the others in the series. Born in San Francisco, educated at Stanford, Bonnie MacBird lives in London with her husband, computer scientist Alan Kay. A fan of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle since age 10, she's active in the Sherlockian community in both the UK and the US, and lectures regularly on Sherlock Holmes writing and creativity. A longtime veteran of Hollywood, MacBird has been a screenwriter and wrote the original script for Tron, which is an awesome, fun movie, an Emmy-winning producer, a playwright, studio exec, and actor. MacBird attributes her enjoyment in capturing voice to both her acting and screenwriting experience and her music training as well. She teaches a popular screenwriting class at UCLA, Extension, which approaches writing for film using techniques of other art forms. In her Sherlock Holmes novels, which we're going to talk about today, she aims to accurately portray the brilliant detective and his friend as closely as possible to Doyle, yet expanding the original short form fiction to full-length novels. Art in the Blood features a child who has disappeared and a bloody art theft, and touches on the theme of the perils and blessings of the artistic temperament. Unquiet Spirits features a murdered girl, a threatened scientist, and a haunted whiskey estate, while reflecting on the dangers of not dealing with the ghosts of one's past. Devil's Due brings Holmes to the edge of evil in order to combat a devilish serial killer. And The Three Locks involves a magic, cutting-edge science at the Cavendish Laboratories at Cambridge and a mysterious box which arrives at 221B, and which defies all efforts to open it. That is my personal favorite, that book. And then What Child Is This provides a Christmas conundrum in which danger stalks two boys, both sought by their fathers, and the mysteries surrounding their identities. Please give a warm virtual welcome to our guest of honor, Bonnie MacBird. All right, I'm going to stop the screen sharing here and get the speaker view on. I'm going to make sure everybody else besides me and Bonnie is muted just for this part of it. Don't worry, I will give everyone an opportunity to ask questions at the end. So don't worry, you'll have a chance. All right. Okay, so Bonnie, What Child Is This? How is this Christmas story different from your previous 4 novels, and why a Christmas adventure?
Well, this is the first novel in the series. It's actually it's a novella, so that's one thing that sets it apart. It's a little bit shorter. Most of the other books have kind of a compilation, or no, I shouldn't say, a connection between 3 different mysteries. This one has 2, so different in that respect. I decided I just wanted a Christmas story. And, of course, Blue Carbuncle is, one of most people's favorites, I think, certainly one of mine. And I like bumping Holmes against Christmas because he's a bit of a curmudgeon, but yeah, it's just kind of fun to put him in that milieu a little bit. And I wanted a Christmas story. But what's very different about this, in addition to my other ones, in addition to it being shorter, is that Frank Cho illustrated. It's an illustrated book, and I was thrilled to get Frank, and I think people will enjoy what he's done.
Yes, talk a little about that. How did you get Frank Cho to illustrate? Because his illustrations are phenomenal and they really match your writing quite well. So how did that come about?
I met Frank at a BSI weekend at, I think, one of the oyster dinners or something. I can't remember exactly when I met him. And we sort of hit it off, and we started talking about pen and ink technique. I'm an amateur artist, and I'm very fond of pen and ink, and I really admire Frank's technique. And he said he emulated a sort of turn of the last century, beginning of the 20th century artist named Franklin Booth. Sorry? Anyway, named Franklin Booth. Anyway, and so he turned me on to Franklin Booth. I started really looking at this guy's beautiful, incredible illustrations, and we started a sort of a conversation about that stuff. So anyway, when I decided to do a Christmas novella and I wanted it to be a little different, I thought it would be incredible if Frank illustrated. So I just asked him, and he said he was interested. And so I put him together with the publisher, and they were very enthusiastic, and they made a deal with Frank, and that's how it happened.
Yeah, he just does a fantastic job in it. It does just a great job.
Yeah,
it really complements your writing.
It's quite fun. I mean, it's a simpler style than Franklin Booth. It's not quite as worked, but it is definitely echoing that look. It's sort of a kind of a cross between, his famous comic book illustrations and this Franklin Booth-ish style. I mean, Frank did the most beautiful program covers for the BSI. So that's where I first saw his work. And then I met him there, and it just, I was very, very thrilled with what he did. It was a kind of a long, interesting process. I had to finish the book before kind of involving him in the pictures and so forth. Because sometimes when I'm writing, I'll go back in and change things earlier. And so it had to be pretty much done. And when it was given to him, and then he asked me to pick out some scenes I thought were particularly suited to be illustrated. And I sent him a few, and he said, "Oh, send me a few more." So I did. And so I made these suggestions, and then he made the selection from that. And we went back and forth a little bit, just so that the pictures would be spread throughout the book, and not all top heavy or something. And he of course illustrated two very interesting action scenes, which I was really thrilled, because of course, as a comic book artist, he's really good at action and, etc., high drama in that sense. So I just love what he did. And he especially loved that he captured Heffy. And if you've read my books, you know that Heffy is a character that I invented, and she's now appeared in 3 of the books. And she's this young, like 16-year-old kind of Cockney orphan, half Jewish and half Irish. And she's a sort of a fireball. So he captured her so beautifully. I love his depiction of Heffy.
Yeah, you mentioned those scenes and that he illustrated, especially the action ones. And one of the things I find, not just about this particular book, but about all your books, is I think we see they're very visual. Like I feel like they're paced a lot like a movie. Hint, hint, Hollywood. They make great movies. And I wonder if you kind of, when you're writing these books, do you think about them like in your brain? Are you thinking like pacing like a movie, or do you have a very different take on it? Is it very different than writing a movie? I was just curious.
Well, I think I can't help but bring some movie sensibility to it, because I worked in films as a story editor at Universal and feature films, and then as a screenwriter for many years. So I can't, I can't unhook from that, really. But I don't consciously try to think of it as a movie. But Conan Doyle himself, his own writing has been called cinematic by various people, even though he predated cinema for most of the series. And it's called that because it has pace, it has narrative drive, and also Watson describes things in a way that we find more cinematic now than other Victorian era, late Victorian writers. He didn't linger on his descriptions quite as long. He didn't do as much internalization of thoughts. He did some, of course. It's a novel, it's not a script, but he did less. And he also, than other writers of his time, he he did more dialogue in his work than a lot of writers, a lot of contemporary writers. And so his own writing kind of feels more cinematic. So yes, and I don't really think like, oh, this is a movie, but I do, while I'm writing, I know that writers have different levels of or different sensations while they're writing. Some people hear everything, and I can actually see it like a movie. So I'm watching it as I'm writing it, so I can see where they are and what's happening. And then it's my job to make you see it too.
Perfect. Switching gears a little bit, let's talk about Christmas. So why a Christmas book, and why, why do you think there's this appeal of this Victorian Christmas, like in A Christmas Carol and of course Blue Carbuncle? Like what is it that appeals to us today about that Victorian time period and the Christmas season?
Well, most of you who are Sherlockians already know this, but most of what we see and picture as Christmas, the imagery of, Saint Nick and the trees and all the big piles of presents, all of that sort of came out of or was popularized in the late Victorian era because Prince Albert brought all the trees and presents and, oranges and, little things for children. He brought all that tradition with him from Germany. He personally loved Christmas. So he brought that into the palace. And of course, what the royal family does, everybody follows. And so, Christmas was illustrated in the magazines, the royal family around the Christmas tree. And so all of that kind of happened and became popular during that period. So by Holmes's time, that was, fully established. And there were the Christmas carols and so forth. And of course, the song "What Child Is This" was sung then as a Christmas carol to the tune of Greensleeves. There's a little interesting anecdote about that. My publisher said, my editor loved the title immediately. I always work from my title, start with the title. And so I really conceptualized the whole story around this title. And so I finished it and I turned it in, and somebody in the marketing department says, well, nobody knows that song. What child is this? I'm like, really? And I went on to Spotify. There's 2,000 versions of the Christmas Carol. What child is this? I think some people do know it. Anyway, so my editor won that battle for me there, and they kept the title, thank goodness. But yeah, but that song was sung then. So, and then also just, I wanted a Christmas story because I love Blue Carbuncle, and, like most of us, I watch the Jeremy Brett over and over every Christmas, and I reread the story every Christmas. And some of you may know that I adapted it for a play, just straight out, the Conan Doyle story, straight out adapted as a play. And we put that on as a Zoom production for the Sherlock Holmes Society of London the year before last. So I love the whole Christmas Holmes thing, and I think a lot of us do. And what's fun is, of course, Holmes is a bit of a curmudgeon, so he's not all mushy about Christmas and Christmas carols and stuff, So kind of, pushing him up against that is room for some humor and some fun.
Perfect. You mentioned a little bit about Jeremy Brett. Of course, we all are huge Brett fans. So I'm just curious, what are some of the depictions of, Sherlock Holmes that you like from the modern takes to the classics? And maybe, if you ever had one of your books turned into a movie, who might be someone you'd like be like, oh, they would be a perfect Sherlock Holmes?
Gosh, I don't have that. I've got to come up with that because I get asked that a lot and I never really have a good answer. Now I know, let's see, I know David Markham, you're in the audience. You're going to cringe at this because I know you don't like most of these, but I really like quite a few depictions of Holmes. I just love the characters so much, and I get really interested in how he's interpreted. Now, some of them irritate me, of course, but I also think that a lot of us spend way too much time giving our opinion about all this. So I'm more of an enthusiast, I guess. So I'm looking to things, wanting to like them very much so. And I loved BBC Sherlock, for example, and maybe not the 4th season as much, but I loved that show. And I loved I love the Downey films. And I love Jeremy Brett. I mean, when he turned around that first scene in that first episode. I mean, that's Sherlock Holmes, he's the one in all of our heads, I think. But I also liked House. I watched House. I watched the first episode of House, and 10 minutes in, I'm like, that's Sherlock Holmes. I was just like instantly caught that they were doing Holmes long before they did all the hints about it. So, I really enjoy elements of that character and seeing him in lots of ways. And, some movies I just like better than others. I wasn't as fond of Elementary for lots of reasons, but some people really are. And I really don't like to dump on the stuff that some people love. I mean, there's lots to love about Holmes. Jeremy Brett is probably the person who looks most like him in my mind, although in my books, they're younger, they're in their 30s. So I'm definitely seeing them as young men. And Jude Law, for example, was a very handsome, he was a very credible Watson to me, because Watson is described in the canon as being a ladies' man, a crack shot, a gambler. So he has a certain panache to him, I think. And that isn't often depicted in the films. But I definitely think he's, but then also he sort of has to interpret Holmes to the rest of the world, which is just, room for a lot of comedy and fun. But the friendship, of course, is the key to all of this. Anyway, so I'm babbling on here, but I haven't really answered your question about who I would see as, but as somebody in their, in their 30s, in their mid to late 30s is how I see these people, both of them, Holmes and Watson. I was surprised to like Henry Cavill and the Enola things. I didn't like the idea of him because I think it was too beefy and kind of sort of healthy looking, I guess. But he's kind of won me over. He's done a nice job. So I don't know. I don't know who I would pick.
Yeah, I would agree with the Enola. I was surprised at just how much I absolutely love those films, and I do think Henry Cavill as Holmes is actually works. You don't think it would, but it does.
Yeah, they totally blew Mycroft in that one, but still,
yes.
But Henry Cavill he surprised me. He's different than I thought he'd be.
They were smart enough to leave Mycroft out of the second movie. So, yeah.
Which is
I thought it was a phenomenal film, even better than the first one. All right, let's talk about the book a little bit more here. So you said you talked a couple of differences. It's a Christmas than your other books. It's a Christmas book. It's a bit shorter. I think I'm surprised you used the word novella because I thought it was still long enough to be considered a novel, but probably similar length as
it's right on the edge, right on the edge there. I mean, there's just guidelines really. So yeah.
Is it about the same length as Study in Scarlet though? I mean, Study in Scarlet's only, I think it's under 50,000 words.
Yeah. It's longer than that. It's definitely longer than that, but it's shorter than my other ones.
Right. It's short. Look, we can agree on that.
Yeah.
So what made this one a little different? Like besides the length and it had, in Christmas, was there anything else that you thought, well, this was kind of a different one?
Yeah, well, there's, like I said, I usually blend 3 stories together in my books. And this one has 2 as a nod to the shorter length, but also I kind of emulating a little bit what Blue Carbuncle did as a story is that it gave us a slightly different Holmes. He definitely had to use deductive reasoning and he had to be his smart self and observe things. And then we saw the Sherlockian machinations from him in it, but it wasn't violent. Nobody's bleeding or had their ears cut off or he was found dead somewhere. It wasn't as violent. So it was a little softer in that sense. And then Holmes, you see a little bit of unusual aspects of Holmes in it. And I liked that I liked those concessions, I guess you might say, to Christmas. And clear choices to do a Christmas story. So I decided that I would try to do one that, while wasn't violent per se, did have danger, and while maybe and had mystery and had people in jeopardy, and a bit of a time clock. In other words, a bit of a pressure. So I needed to create something that had narrative drive but wasn't horrific. So that's what I was looking to do in defining the crimes and the way Holmes solves them. I've had some criticism of the book saying, oh, it's too easy for him. And it's like, actually, no. In fact, he figures out some of the things earlier in the book than he does in some of my other books. But then once he figures it out, the solution of what to do is not clear at all. So, and it requires something of him that Watson hasn't seen before, really. And so I like pushing him a bit in that direction and not being really sure about it. And true to many of the originals, Holmes plays his cards close to the vest. He doesn't tell Watson everything he's doing and thinking. He tells some of it, and we and Watson are a bit in the dark, as we often are. And then when the reveal comes, it's like you realize that he's it's come off of his observations, his very minute observations, and his intuition, as well as his logic. So I like positioning a story in that way to create tension, to deliver the good Sherlockian stuff, but without violence. So that was my goal.
I think you did a really good job with that. So
Thank
nicely
you.
done. One of the things I think, and we have a lot of Sherlockian authors on the Zoom call.
Yes,
here.
you do. It's a very good ones.
So one of the things I think we all, have that balance of is being traditional Victorian, like trying to capture, the flavor of Doyle, but also, you can't help but live in the 21st century. And some of your book, and I don't want to give anything away because there's at least one twist that I thought was just phenomenal. And it was very tender, in my opinion. And, I just wonder, how do you try to find that balance of that traditional Holmes, but also connecting to the contemporary world?
Well, it's interesting. A couple of the reviewers have picked up on the fact that that the book is about marginalized individuals in the society then. And so to some people, to some readers, that feels way too contemporary. In fact, I've gotten some criticism for that. But in fact, there's nothing anachronistic in the story at all. So one of the big turns, it'd be a spoiler if you haven't read the book. So I hate to light on it too much, but there is no anachronism in there. But I've been accused of being anachronistic because of this supposedly modern view of disenfranchised people. But in fact, those people were disenfranchised and marginalized then, and they were in danger then. So this is about danger, about some people that are innocent people in danger. And so the facts are that these kinds of people that are told in this book they just were. So I've had criticisms before about being anachronistic, and I wish Amazon had left the ability for the writer to respond to some of these things. One of my favorites was in Art in the Blood. Holmes is meditating, and he's meditating in a way that we recognize as mindfulness meditation. And someone said, that's anachronistic, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, because actually it's based on Vipassana meditation. And there was a Vipassana meditation center in London right then that was kind of hip and cool, called the Pali Text Society. So he could very easily have learned that there. Plus, once you see him sitting on the mound of pillows, I forget which one that is in, and he meditates all night. That's clearly mindfulness meditation. He's clearly using various techniques there. And then again, and one of the other things he expounds on the theories of the religions of Ceylon to Watson over some dinner. And that's where mindfulness, Vipassana meditation originated. So hello, of course he did that. And it was really real. And I have a meditation teacher myself who actually turned me on to the Pali Text Society and pointed me in the direction, because I wanted to use that. so that's how sometimes the writing comes. It's like I have an idea and I want to use it, but I go like, did this happen then? Was it called that then? Was it what, you know, and I will then follow my nose. I mean, it's something I want, but before I put it in, I will make sure that yes, that is possible. So you know, so what it may feel very contemporary, and you know, again, when I said, you know, you can't help but bring yourself to your writing as a writer. So I'm not just trying to emulate Doyle mechanically. I have to. The themes I choose, the ideas I choose are something that are important to me, of course, because why spend this time writing? And you can't help but bring some of yourself, but you don't want to bring an anachronism in. So I don't consciously make concessions in that sense, or try to play to the modern reader, other than I will make a choice. Actually, one of the few things I do is I will sometimes use not full sentences. I will sometimes use sentence fragments, which Conan Doyle did not do. I think maybe at a very rare occasion, but basically didn't do that. But mostly I try to emulate the speed and the energy and the drive of the way the story is told then. And you know, that's why they're still read now, 130 years later. That's why we still love Conan Doyle, because they feel fresh. And the modern reader can read them. So they don't have the endlessly long Victorian sentences with thousands of clauses and, you know, many $5 words, although some pasticheurs will do that, but he didn't really do that. Other Victorians did.
All right, I'm going to ask one last question, and I'm going to open up to the group. It's just you've moved around a lot, right? You were in Hollywood, and now you're living just like a street over, or a few streets over, maybe from Baker Street. So, how did you end up in London, and how does living in London impact your work?
Well, it was kind of circuitous, and I started coming here to research the books, and I've always been an Anglophile since I was a little kid. You know, many of us who grew up in my era, you know, Haley Mills and James Bond and the Beatles and et cetera. I mean, there were so many English things that we all loved. And so I was an Anglophile for a long time, and I'd visited before, of course. And anyway, I came here once to do a research trip for the book, and I just really loved it here. I happen to also work in theater and love theater, so that was another attraction. So I just started coming more and more often. My husband's like, we need to stay there more. So he wanted to stay with me. For a while, we were staying in a hotel across the street from where we live now. And finally, we just decided to bite the bullet and get a flat here. And then the pandemic hit. So we decided to shelter here for, you know, the few months that this was going to take. We thought it would at least last till Christmas. This was 3 years ago now, whatever, 2 years. But anyway, then unfortunately, now we're in a different state altogether. My husband is quite ill and we can't move. So we are here. We are just here.
All right, thank you. And I hope your husband feels better, obviously. And I'd like to open it up to the group right now. If you want to just use the hand raise feature, and then I can just see who has questions, and I'll kind of go through them. I see David was the first one, so I'll go ahead and David, you can unmute and ask your question.
Hi, Bonnie.
Hi, David.
I have a question about in the previous book, The Three Locks.
Yes.
At the end, you said that the next one would be The Serpent Under.
Yes.
Has that been suspended, or did the new book just grab you and hijack you? Or what's the story with that?
Thank you for asking. The new book grabbed me and hijacked me. Exactly. That's what I would exactly say. But The Serpent Under, I'm now 40,000 words into that one. So it is coming. It was, I had an idea for it already. But then I was talking to my publisher and then after I'd met Frank, and I thought, it would be really fun to do a Christmas book and have Frank, and it just seemed to be an idea that went together. And so I pitched that to my editor, and he said, yeah, do that one first. So
That's
did.
kind of what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure the other one was still happening too.
Oh, thank you. It is still happening. Thank
Good.
you.
Okay, Robin rolls, and then Tom Burns, I think, had his hand up.
Right. Bonnie, you mentioned sort of a sort of conflation of Charles Dickens' Christmas and Sherlock Holmes, and I just wondered if you'd seen the Sherlock Carol taking
No, I
place.
haven't. I know you did, and I saw your write-up on it. I would like to. It's like really, it's blocks from my house here.
I
But
can hardly recommend it.
yeah, you liked it, didn't you?
Mm.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, I don't normally like crossovers, but this one sort of hit the spot.
Well, that's good. I would normally I go to theater, like at least twice a week. Because my husband is immune compromised, he's very ill actually. So I have to be incredibly conservative about exposure. So I'm basically still in lockdown. It's difficult, it's challenging, but I'm treating as though we're still in lockdown because I can't. If I bring COVID to him, it's extremely dangerous. So I haven't seen that, even though it's very close by. And I would love
so
to see
sorry.
it. Yeah. So I'm just stuck here. Yeah.
Oh, what a shame.
It's not great, but thank goodness my job doesn't require me to show up at an office. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And also, I just want to say, if anyone's interested in Sherlock Carroll, I had mentioned last month that they had reached out to 5 Miles and they sent us some discount coupons. And if so, if you would like one of their discount passes, just let me know and I'll be happy to send you the code for it. Looks like Tom Burns is next, and then Madeline will be after him. You have to unmute, Tom. There you
Okay.
go. Yep, you're good.
2 quick points. Bonnie, thank you so much for doing this today. I'm sorry to say I've only read one of your books, which is Art in the Blood, and I enjoyed it tremendously. My excuse is that I try to read other things besides Holmes. I have a stack of MX books this high. But anyway, the next person who tells you about being anachronistic as far as the reformers go, the Victorians had a grand tradition of reformers. And the two that spring to my mind are Charles Dickens and Henry Mason. But I would say almost civil reform started then because of the conditions in London, which were so bad. And there were so many people who wanted to do something about it. So I don't think that's anachronistic at all. Also, when I write pastiches, I see Sherlock Holmes ahead of his time. So yes, he's a Victorian gentleman, but he pioneered criminalistic techniques that we use today. Maybe they don't exactly resemble what we do. Certainly didn't know what DNA was. He did know what fingerprints were. And I assume he would be very interested in that. There might be a monograph lurking somewhere that we haven't discovered yet. I wrote a story in which he did some geographical profiling because of his mathematical abilities. I don't think any of that is out of the question because Sherlock Holmes was a genius. And, that's something that he would do. So I now will go and get the rest of your books.
Oh, thank you, Tom.
Absolutely. I feel, I'm trying to write and read, and sometimes it's just so overwhelming to do both. But I think they're both necessary if I'm going to be a good writer. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Madeline.
Yeah, so actually picking up on the anachronistic thing, because I do notice that there's definitely a more progressive sensibility in your books, which I enjoy and appreciate. And I think that what people sometimes don't get is that it's what maybe more what's anachronistic, it's not anachronistic that that minorities existed, it's like, people of color are only now starting to really show up more in period dramas, but my goodness, they were there all along. But it's just like, at the time, is that right? Is that writers of the time didn't write so much about these people, but like they existed. So I appreciate that you do things like that. It's not modern. It just feels modern because people at the time kind of ignored them. Anyway, I actually have not read the book yet, but that's because I'm saving it for my Christmas read. So I always try to have a book that a Christmas book that I read around Christmas Day. So that's what I'm saving this one for this year. So
thank you, Madeline. Several people have told me that, and Nancy just said she was doing that too, and Margie. Anyway, about progressive. That's interesting. You said progressive because that has been used as a compliment and as an insult to me.
I'm sure
in a variety of ways. However, if you really study the canon, and they take the yellow face, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Conan Doyle he didn't present Holmes as progressive so much as just this stuff was not he didn't care about this stuff.
Right.
He cared about crimes. He cared about people, not being harmed. And he cared about, protecting the innocent.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as what people were doing in their private lives, he could give a fig, really. In my view, that's very in character and not necessarily progressive. In terms of me writing him is like not passing judgment on things that some people might, seem to make him progressive. It's just he doesn't really care. That's my thought about him. So anyway. But you have to write what what you're feeling, and you have to do that as a writer. Even when you're writing pastiche and emulating, I think.
I mean, I really feel like everybody's writing it's a portrait of them, and you can't help that. It's just you will come through in your writing.
Yeah, you can't help it. You can't help to do that. Yeah. And I see that's one of the reasons I think, Conan Doyle, I really love the man because he created these two, Holmes and Watson, these people. I mean, I'd rather be with them than most people on the planet, really. And unfortunately, I get to spend my days like that because that's who I want to be with for the most part. That and my husband. My husband is very much like Sherlock Holmes, actually. But anyway, so it's a comfortable place to be in a 221B. I'm sure, David, you find that as well. And it's a place we like to be.
Thank you. Steve Mason.
So
Oh, there you are.
Facebook post last night. And what I want to point out to everybody is, in a fit of boredom several years ago, I ran all 60 stories of the canon through several reading comprehension programs on the internet. And what I found was that what Doyle was writing, and I don't know if it was a conscious or a subconscious, his reading comprehension levels for back then were, they said, what it'd be today, 5th to 8th grade. And I think that was part of the genius of his stories, was that it made it available to so many people because so many people could read them and understand them. And I'm with David. I love the pastiches from the 1890s and fitting into the true thing. And I think that's where Bonnie does better than a lot of pastiche writers, is because her pastiches are fitting into that same reading comprehension thing. And I told her, I said, I hope that's not an insult, but I think she is fitting exactly what Doyle wrote. And unfortunately, there are some people that write pastiches that I think they're writing them for PhD students as for their audience. And they're trying to emulate more, J.R.R. Tolkien than they are Doyle with their 27 pages of narrative on one character, you know, and so Bonnie, I just have to say I've loved all 5 books. I finished the last one last night at 12:30 this morning.
Oh, good. I
and-
love to keep
and I
people
also-
awake.
And I also have to tell people a very quick story. So I get this book in the mail week before last. It's like, oh, this is nice. And it was, you know, whose child is this? Except I didn't order the book. And it was actually meant for somebody in Michigan. So I have hijacked their book somehow. HarperCollins accidentally sent it to me instead. So I wrote to Bonnie and she was extremely nice and said, go ahead and keep the book as my compliments and we'll get the other person another book. So I am very
Yeah,
proud to
I
have
don't do
that
those
one too.
lists. Somebody else does those lists to do, you know, so I can add people and stuff, but I don't even know what all those lists are, to be honest.
Right.
But yeah, I think you were supposed to get one, Steve, really. So I don't know. If anybody here thinks they are supposed to get one, you just let me know. Okay, because they're trying to send it out to people who are gonna present it to their groups or review
Oh,
it,
okay.
some publication or some such like that. So
Well,
that's-
we did announce it and show it at our last Crew the Barkbone Star meeting. So it
But
did
I
go
Oh,
out
thank
to
you.
several people.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'd like to respond to your, you write for 5th to 8th graders comment. Well, actually, I think of myself as writing for smart people because Holmesians are smart people. They want to be teased and tickled and, you know, challenged. So I think of my readers as smart people and I write up to them as opposed to writing down to anybody. And but I think sometimes when people emulate 19th century fiction, they think it means very curly-cued sentences and way too many $5 words, way too many. And you don't need them all like that. I mean, at that time, though, when you say his work was 5th to 8th graders, people who were literate at all did have bigger vocabularies than we do now. They just did. Right. So you know, I try to write to that basically. I write to the literate lover of adventure. Basically, and so that's and I think of my readers as smart people, but who want to be carried on a ride, viscerally carried on a ride.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. And I think that's a perfect note to end on. Okay. I want to thank you so much for taking the time out to be at our meeting. Everybody definitely get this book. I don't know if it's coming in.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It's a wonderful book. And there's just something charming. As I was saying right at the beginning of this meeting, I think before I really got on to Bonnie, there's something quite charming about her Sherlock Holmes work, which I think is lacking in a lot of the current pastiches, and I really appreciate it.
Well, I think Doyle is funny. See, I think he's very funny.
He is. No, that's true.
Yeah, that's part of what I'm trying to emulate, actually. He makes me laugh.
So another virtual round of applause for Bonnie.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
And as I said earlier in the meeting, we will be on our own little hiatus in January. It would be very difficult to run a meeting from the BSI dealers room or merchants room. In February, we're going to have Margie Deck and Nancy Holder as our guests, and they are on the call now. I don't know if you want to say something, but they have done a wonderful website for the Arthur Conan Doyle Society on Doyle's Blue John Gap story, and I'll send the link out to everyone. It's really great. It's got the original story, it's got some essays, it's got some pastiches on it that were inspired by the story, one from me actually, and it's a really, really fun book. Oh, Bonnie, if you want to, Bonnie asked, do we want a reading?
Well, actually, that's what you told me you did. So I don't know. We've gone rather long time. Maybe we've gone too long. So I don't know what your time is like.
We usually end now, but I'm game to stay late if anybody else is. You guys want to stay late a little bit to hear Bonnie read some of the book?
For it.
All right.
whatever. I don't want to inflict it on you.
Oh, I don't think you'd be inflicting it on us at all.
All right. All
But
right.
do you have your spot? Oh yeah, Jay's
Sure, I have
saying-
my spot. I'm
Oh,
sure.
right. Well, there we go.
I work in
us-
theater. You think I didn't rehearse this?
Bonnie, you have the floor still, okay? Nancy, hold that thought. I saw you unmuted, but we'll come back to you at the
and
end.
If you all want to leave, I will understand. But
No one wants to leave, Bonnie.
all right. But first of all, I'm going to show you, because I can't hold it up while I'm reading, but I'm going to show you Frank's picture that goes with this chapter. See if I can hold it. Yeah. So this is on Oxford Street, and a little boy has just been snatched by this guy in a hood, and he's knocked the mother to the ground. Okay, so that's it's one of Frank's best pictures, I think, in the book. So this is chapter 2, and chapter 1, somebody's visited and left, and Holmes has stunk up the place with his chemistry, and Watson wants to get him out, get him out of the flat. So chapter 2, outrage on Oxford Street. A roast beef sandwich and 2 glasses of cider did wonders for my spirits, but little, I was sorry to note, for my friend. His Scrooge-like mood persisted as we made our way along Oxford Street back towards Baker Street. Throngs of gaily dressed Christmas shoppers in heavy winter coats and bright scarves impeded our progress along the pavement, and I noted my companion growing increasingly impatient. Trying for a cab was impossible. The roadway was jammed and every available vehicle was full. The air was crisp and frosty, which for some added to the seasonal cheer. Jostled by a group of school children with shrill voices, Holmes stopped abruptly. "Watson, I've had enough of these crowds. Come, we'll take a back way." But just as he cut through the through the throng towards an alley, a woman's scream pierced the air. At that moment, all of Christmas changed. We turned to see a beautiful, well-dressed lady clutching a small boy as a tall man in a cloak and hood tried to wrest the child from her arms. I got a quick glimpse of his face, pale eyes contorted in a fierce frown, the rest masked by a scarf. A second woman tried vainly to beat him off. This commotion took place in plain sight, some 20 feet from us, with people all round. Without a thought, Holmes and I pushed through the crowd towards the struggle. Before we could reach them, the attacker had knocked down both the mother and what appeared to be an accompanying female servant. People around them screamed and backed away. The 2 women and the child were on the pavement, the child of perhaps 4 years, wild-eyed in fear. Packages were strewn around them. The hooded man froze for an instant, then, despite the milling crowd, he reached down and succeeded in wrenching the child away. The next seconds were critical. "Mammy!" the boy cried. "Call the police!" someone shouted. That instant, Holmes and another man were on the abductor, bringing him down, with Holmes pulling the child from the man's grasp, just as the villain himself tumbled to the ground. Holmes hesitated a second, holding the stunned child, then thrust the boy at me, and I caught the little fellow. He turned back to the assailant, but the man had leapt to his feet and was pushing his way through the crowd. Holmes followed. "Help her!" shouted a woman. "She's hurt!" I turned to the mother, who was sprawled on the pavement, her beautiful velvet cloak dirtied by the fall, and her hand to her cheek, which had suffered a blow. More exhortations came from the crowd, but little actual help was forthcoming. The servant next to the elegant young woman on the pavement leaned towards her. Seeing that her mistress was mostly unhurt, the young woman arose and gently took the child from me. "Thank you," said she. "Jonathan, little one, dear God." Behind me, I heard distant shouts and looked, but saw no sign of Holmes or the attacker through the dense crowd. If anyone could catch the man, it would be my friend. Another man who had tried to help lurched painfully up from the pavement and shrugged helplessly. I knelt by the fallen mother and extended my hand to help her up. "I'm a doctor," I said gently. "Are you hurt, madam? You've had quite a shock." I'm unhurt," said she. She took my hand and rose, her face white, eyes filled with tears. Fortunately, I saw only a small scratch on her cheek, but no swelling, no bruising. "Jonathan," said she, taking the child from her servant. His cries had turned into keening moans, which softened as she caressed his golden locks. Jonathan wrapped his arms around his mother's neck. She held the boy close, kissing the top of his head. There, darling," said she. The maid retrieved the child's cap from the pavement and placed it on his head. The mother looked up at me. Please give me your card, sir, so I may properly thank you. Can someone please call me a cab? I fished in my pocket for Holmes's card, which I had continued to carry with me at all times out of habit and perhaps hope. I was aware that a small crowd had gathered around us in a tight ring, bubbling with curiosity. As was the way with the public, everyone felt obliged to weigh in on the situation. An outrage, cried one, and at Christmas time too. The boy, is he all right? Can you imagine trying to steal a child in this crowd? From ahead of us on the street, I heard the shrill whistle of the police. I need to get him home, said the mother, pulling her little boy closer. I looked out once again for Holmes, but neither he nor the attacker was visible. Holmes, I called out. I heard a shout and a police whistle again, farther in the distance, and realized the villain was perhaps still fleeing through the crowd. But what had happened to Holmes? Though drawn to follow, I nevertheless turned back to the lady who stood embracing her little boy, covering his tear-streaked face with kisses. His cries had subsided, and he hiccuped in the aftermath, his arms wrapped around his mother's neck. All was well. I had a cab for you, madam, called out a young man who had somehow managed to engage one despite the crowds. The servant picked up the last of her packages with the help from passers-by, now emboldened once the crisis had passed. The young man and I both helped the three into the cab. I held out Holmes's calling card and I said, I'm Dr. John Watson. My friend has gone after your attacker. His name is Sherlock Holmes and this is his card. If you would like assistance in pursuing justice, you could not do better than. The lady was occupied with her child, but the servant leaned out of the open door and snatched the card just before the young man who had called the cab slammed it shut. Mistaking my intentions, he said, hardly the time to be soliciting business, sir. Ignoring him, I inquired, if I may have your name, madam. The lady glanced up. Oh, thank you, doctor, for your help. My name is... But the cab took off, and her last words were lost to me. Irritated by this, I shot a glare at the young man, then turned back to the crowd and began making my way along the street in the direction in which the villain had fled. As if to punctuate the disturbing event, it suddenly began to snow heavily. I pulled my collar tighter and continued on. My friend then appeared, walking in my direction. I could read at once the disappointment in his posture. Holmes arrived at my side, pale and breathing heavily. Slippery fellow, Watson, and resourceful. Were it not for this infernal Christmas throng, I would have had him. He shuddered with the cold, and I pulled him inside the nearest shop, a bell tinkling as I did so. A blessed warmth surrounded us. Standing near the door, we looked out at the festive pine boughs hanging above the mullioned windows to watch the snow that now came down in a deluge. The hats and shoulders of passers-by turned white. It was a veritable Christmas card if one were of artistic bent. Holmes slowly began to catch his breath. The man must have been remarkably fit to have outrun him. Did no one try to assist? I asked. He seized and threw two people into my path, said he bitterly. Fortunately, they were unharmed. In spite of the warmth where we now stood, he shivered again. Some tobacco, gentlemen, came a voice behind us, more pointed than polite. We'd happened upon a smoker's emporium. The proprietor stood behind a long glass counter. Holmes looked over at him, distracted. What the? No. Then I will kindly ask you to, have you any Havanas? I asked, reaching for my purse. I do, said the fellow, a smile lighting up his face. Behind me here. How many? I asked the price and purchased 2 cigars. The shopkeeper happily rang up the sale. You're too polite, Watson, by half, whispered Holmes. Havanas are not your favorite. No, but they're yours. Merry Christmas. I handed Holmes his gift. Thank you, he said, pocketing the cigars, but bah humbug anyway. I laughed. Sherlock Holmes, ever the curmudgeon. We pulled up our collars and rushed out into the frigid swell of snow.
Bonnie, that was wonderful. Thank you.
Do you do your own audiobooks, Bonnie?
I actually do record audiobooks, but not my own. I record the prologues to mine. And somebody put in the chat here that they liked the audiobook reader we have. I'm so glad. Yeah, I like them too. Simon Darwin. Anyway, yeah, no, I have actually read audiobooks for other people, but not mine. Obviously, I don't sound like Watson. So.
It was well worth staying late to hear your reading. It was a wonderful reading, and probably I saw some people in the chat commenting on it. So you have a lovely reading voice, which goes very well with your lovely writing. So appreciate it. All right, thank you everyone again for being here. This is just a wonderful session as always, and happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you.
I will have the recording link for this up soon, and take care, everyone, and
Thank you.
you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Nice to see you all. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Happy holidays.
Happy
Happy
holidays.
Yes, happy
holidays.
holidays to everyone.
Bye.
Bye.